там про транзакции. И эфириум и Ethereum считают блокчейном второго, там скорее про некоторые алгоритмы или смарт-контракты, которые нужно в этом блокчейне записывать и вызывать. EOS это один из проектов, у них есть и конкуренты, наверное, сегодня тоже про них расскажут. Один из проектов такого третьего поколения, там, где уже можно не только смарт-контракты, а и децентрализованные приложения. И фактически это децентрализованная операционная система. Большое спасибо всем, кто сегодня пришел. Еще большое спасибо Sryptolions и Blockchain Lab, компаниям, которые сделали возможным сегодняшний наш ивент. И если Blockchain Lab вы немножко понимаете и уже знакомы большинству из вас, то Sryptolions это такая новая компания на нашем небосклоне, да, на нашем горизонте. Эти ребята вам понравятся, я уверен, что они профессионалы, во-первых, а во-вторых, они очень приятны в общении, и я думаю, вам будет полезно с ними тоже познакомиться. Итак, первый наш сегодняшний доклад будет все-таки я хотел по-нашему означать написать, но будем по-вашему. Окей. Роман Скасків, і таке маленьке зауваження, що у нас середовище айтішне, воно розмовляє, вже на Basic і на Fortran не розмовляє, але на багатьох інших мовах розмовляє. Тому сьогодні будемо мультикультурні, буде російська мова, буде українська, і English will be available too. So, let's switch 3 languages and 5 speakers, live speakers, and 2 speakers from Skype. So, Roman Skaskiw, Sryptolions, please Roman make some kind of intro, and the audience is yours.
Hello. Well, I'm very happy to be here. My name is Roman. Bogdan and I founded a team called Sryptolions. We're striving to be EOS block producers. Unlike Bitcoin miners, EOS block producers are chosen by a vote of EOS token holders, so it's kind of like a political campaign. Before I start, let me thank Blockchain Lab for doing all this organization. Let me thank Unit Factory for giving us this beautiful space. If anyone doesn't know, Unit Factory is a free school for software engineers, and it's a school without teachers. So you come here, you either learn by yourself or you learn as a group with your colleagues. Really, really cool concept. Let's see, may I see a show of hands? Who here is a software developer? I suspect it's a lot. Okay, so maybe a little less than half. Who here is an entrepreneur? All right, maybe a quarter. Any lawyers? I invited a few lawyers to come here. 2 lawyers, wonderful. Okay, so I thought I would start sort of broadly about what crypto technology is, talk about why I'm excited about EOS, and then say what the future may look like. So I think there are there are more than 3, but I think there are 3 useful framings of how to broadly summarize cryptocurrencies in 1 or 2 sentences. There's the scientific explanation of cryptocurrencies, which is it solves the decentralized consensus problem. The decentralized consensus problem. There was a 1985 paper out of Yale University entitled The Impossibility of Decentralized Consensus, but it turns out that we can solve that problem, so that we now have ways to make agreements without a center. It's very powerful. Okay? Second way to understand it may be useful for business people, for the entrepreneurs. Think of all the things that the internet did with information. It is now starting to do those same things with value. You can divide it, share it, pass it back and forth, and I think the change to the world in general is going to be even bigger. The internet of value is going to be even bigger and more revolutionary than the internet of information. And the last sort of framing that I'm going to give for cryptocurrencies in general may be useful for lawyers or philosophers, and that's you can make promises now. You can make promises to someone on the other side of the world, and you have a way of sort of guaranteeing that promise. That lets us cooperate in ways that people never before cooperated. So what have we already seen? What has this short history of cryptocurrencies already brought to us? I think it brought to us private money. Most people don't realize that during the free banking era in the United States, so from about 1840 to 1865, there were thousands of different types of currencies. Churches had their own currencies, businesses had their own currencies, communities had their own currencies. So I think this is coming back, and I think that that is overwhelmingly a good thing. The author of the famous book Black Swan, Nassim Taleb, called Bitcoin a sort of guarantee against the Orwellian future. All right, we have our value stored in a way that nobody can touch it. That's very powerful. What else has the crypto revolution brought us? It has given many people low-cost access to investment markets. So just in the first half of 2017, $3 billion were invested in cryptocurrency projects. So this is bypassing a huge investment infrastructure. Like there are companies whose only job it was, lawyers whose only job it was, like all these deeply entrenched organizations whose only job it was to bring companies to investment, and now there's sort of a low-cost way of doing it, and everyone's jumping onto this road. It's not a highway yet, it's still small, but it's there, and it's just so inviting, and it's so good for the world by reducing friction and giving people access to investment. And I think the third thing that crypto is already doing is creating different types of governance of companies. We already see something called dApps, decentralized applications. The cryptocurrency Dash was a big pioneer here, where they had this governance system built in. Dash took a look at all the arguments that were happening in Bitcoin and said we can do better. And they really pioneered governance where holders of Dash can vote on different proposals. Value is reserved, and it's released as the results of these votings come in. So people can make proposals that I think we need to invest in this. They lock up a whole bunch of Dash, and they make that release. Very cool thing. This is already here. Okay, so why EOS? Well, I guess the other two big examples of governance besides Dash are Bitshares and Steemit. Those were built by Dan Larimer. Those were built by the same guy who's now building EOS. And in my view, those are the two best applications of cryptocurrency that do something besides money. So a lot of cryptocurrencies serve as private money, but there's this question, what else can we do? Can we build decentralized applications? Okay, Bitshares was built all the way back in 2014. It's a decentralized exchange and a lending platform. And I think it has the first stability coins. So he made BitDollars and BitGold, which is a cryptocurrency that within certain boundaries is stable against the price of dollars and stable against the price of gold. This isn't so impressive today, but in 2014, it was amazing. Next, Dan Larimer built Steemit, which is a social network. And the amazing thing is you can use Steemit without ever knowing that it's blockchain technology. But it is a blockchain. Every comment, every article lives on the blockchain. So I think these are the two, in a sort of industry where so much is hype and BS and hundreds of $millions of investment, you have these two like awesome examples of very mature, sophisticated products. And now Dan's building Steemit. So that's reason number one, why EOS. Reason number two is sort of a philosophical reason, and we were having a minor disagreement off to the side here a moment ago. But EOS takes a human-first approach. So there's this idea in the crypto space that if you hold the private keys, you hold the coins. If you lost your private keys, well, sorry for you. Or if someone stole them, sorry for you. EOS takes a human-first approach where there's an arbitrage system and there's a market for justice. So arbiters will rise and fall in status. And if somebody steals your private keys or defrauds you, or if you lose your private keys, all of these things are reversible. The arbiters will speak to the block producers, and the block producers can reverse transactions. It's a controversial idea. I was against it when I first heard it. I was maybe a typical sort of crypto punk revolutionary, but I think they're right. I think the law and order is the way to go with competing justice systems. It also acknowledges the fallibility of code. No code is perfect. There's code that has been working for decades in satellites and spaceships, and they still find bugs. So there's a lot of effort being expended to make code perfect. There's new programming languages being invented by some other projects that try to help you build perfect auditable code. There's a cryptocurrency called QuantStamp that audits smart contracts. Very important, and that has its place. But EOS's sort of philosophy is that all code has mistakes. Let's build human systems where humans can recover from mistakes. Very interesting and very different. And I think the third and the last reason I'll give you of why I personally am as excited about EOS as I was about Bitcoin back in 2012 is it just seems right. Like wherever I look closely at details, it just seems like they've thought things through. Like one little detail from the technical paper is that when you send transactions, the transaction puts the hash of a recent block. So it's not just the block producers responsible for the integrity of the chain. Every transaction also shares that responsibility. That's a small thing. A big thing is the way they did incentives. So in a lot of the other smart contract platforms, there's a small fee. And they're advertising, my fee will be this small, this small, this small. In EOS, it's free for users. And the way they structured this is that the holder of the smart contract has to own EOS tokens, and that reserves sort of bandwidth in the EOS network. So let me say that again. In all the other smart contract platforms of which I'm aware, the user pays a small fee. So if you build, say, Facebook as a smart contract, every time you make a comment, you pay a small fee. Every time you make a like, you pay a small fee. I think that is a non-starter for many types of applications. And I think EOS has it right. The person who creates the application doesn't need to pay. They just need to reserve a whole bunch of EOS, and then they sort of reserve bandwidth. They reserve memory, throughput, storage space, CPU time on all the block producers. To me, that seems right. So, what was I going to talk about next?
Can you ask questions? Or later?
Let's, why don't you go first, since you had the courage to ask, but all other questions will be reserved for later.
If I'm a producer of this smart contract and put it in EOS, yes, I will pay for every user to come. And then 1 million Chinese people come to me.
The question is what happens if I get a lot of users?
Yes.
You're not paying for the users. You're renting bandwidth on the block producers.
Okay,
so if you get too many users than you can handle, your application will be slow.
Yes.
That's not such a serious punishment. You will be slow.
If I don't have support users better from other applications, yes, they will attack.
DDoS.
Yes, like DDoS. Or
DDoS use of your smart contract.
yes.
Oh, that's an interesting. That's it.
a
Yeah.
good question.
Okay, what if somebody spams your smart contract? That's a good question. The short answer is I don't know, but I'm going to guess.
Because it's
I don't know, but I'm going to guess. My guess is that the creator of the smart contract may be obligated to put in fees or tiny little fees to stop that kind of spam attack.
yes, and then they will pay for their
And then
rights.
and then the users will end up paying.
Yeah.
That's a really good question. Well, thank you for asking. The short answer is I don't know. Okay, let's reserve the rest of the questions for later. So things that are coming. I told you 3 things that are already here: private money, access to investment markets, and decentralized governance. 3 things that are coming. One is a market for a legal system. So if you make a reputation system for arbiters and a sort of thing that needs arbitrage, like EOS, I think you're gonna have like lawyers who are offering this service bigger and bigger. And I think that's a really big deal, to have a sort of extra national judicial system. And I think even some of the people working on this now don't realize how big a deal this can become. Yeah. The next thing that's coming, I wonder if this cannot be the thing that comes after SaaS. So the way software was sold, first it was sold on CD-ROMs that you bought in a store on a box. And I still remember the artwork on my Doom 2 box, which I bought in 1995. I like the artwork so much that I put it on my bookshelf in my room. So that's how you used to buy software, and then you would download it and buy a license, and then came the SaaS revolution where you pay a monthly subscription. I wonder if there's a way to structure tokenization so that people just rent your tokens and do kind of what EOS does. They just sit on your tokens in order to have access to your application and then sell them. I think that is possible to structure. You're kind of trading the problems of a salesman with the problems of a central banker, where you're more managing a monetary supply and having a little kind of inflation to cover your operational costs. So I think that's possibly coming. And I think the third and most exciting thing that's coming is we're all, as sort of planet Earth, we're all going to get better at telling the truth. Very simple example, which Dan Larimer talked about last week, digital cameras, they can sign their photos. All right, it's such a simple, obvious, elegant example. And then you have sort of the promise of the camera manufacturer that this photo was not photoshopped or video or whatever, or recorded. I think that's so simple and so beautiful and so accessible. Your camera just adds a signature to the photo. And then you can check the signature so that the manufacturer is guaranteeing that that's a genuine photo. More significantly, in my opinion, you can have people post bonds for telling the truth. So imagine that you lock up a bunch of digital currency and you say, I make the following statement. I promise that the following statement is true under these rules of truth. And then you invite the whole world to try to take that money that you locked up by proving you wrong. I think that's a big deal. I think a politician, or let's start with simpler use cases, because this will enter the market with simpler use cases. But imagine a journalist reporting on something controversial, and they want to prove to you that they're telling the truth. So this journalist, or somebody who supports them, can just lock up a bunch of money and say that these statements are true, and if anybody can prove them wrong, you could take it to this judicial system and get this money. I think this is very powerful, and I think the idea of having such a bond, meaning reserving currency to prove that a statement is true, or to guarantee that your behavior will be within certain bounds, I think for our children and grandchildren, this might become as common an institution as, say, insurance is for us. Everybody understands insurance. I think our children and grandchildren might sort of just understand that, yeah, you reserve some money that guarantees certain behavior from you or guarantees truthful statements, and then you sort of invite the world to attack it. I think that's really powerful, and that's the type of thing that might change the world in a serious way. All right, so let me end with 3 questions that I have about EOS. And thank you, I now have 4 questions about EOS. How do smart contract developers defend themselves against malicious users? But aside from that, I can't quite understand how EOS is going to work on multiple chains. Right now there's one blockchain, and the version that starts June 1st will have one blockchain. Later it will have parallel chains. So does that mean one token will exist simultaneously on all the chains? Will you have different tokens on different chains? Will you have, I think you can have both. Both are certainly possible. But then you have the problem of just making this simple, because it's just so hard to keep track and so hard to sort of have that abstraction in your head of parallel chains and coins that exist across multiple chains or on just one of them. So that's a big question for me. The second question is what I alluded to earlier. If you're trying to replace SaaS with tokenization, there are many different ways you can do that, and it's not clear to me what is the best. And let's say if you want to build accounting software, on a blockchain, and you make it open source, suddenly some developer can just prune out the requirement for your token, and then you created freeware. Right now, most of the dApps that we see, they're valuable because of their community. Like Steemit, a social network, it's valuable because there's a community, so you don't have that problem. Or Bitshares, it's a decentralized exchange. It's valuable because there are people using it. But if you make like accounting software, which doesn't rely on the community, there are different ways to go about. It's not clear to me what's the best way to have incentive to build something like that. And I have different ideas. One idea is to not make it open source. Another idea is to make guaranteed promises to the community that it will become open source after a certain point. Another idea is to make it fully open source and try to sell professional services around it. Interesting place for discussion. What was my third question about EOS? Oh yeah, this isn't so much about EOS, but the way dApps are functioning. Right now, a lot of dApps are structured like Athenian democracies. For example, all the holders of Dash just vote, and the result of the vote is the work that gets done. I think groups are not good at making, many groups are not good at making sort of bold decisions and having a unified vision. So I think we might see an evolution of the structure of decentralized governance, where instead of having groups make decisions, you kind of select your CEO or your very small group of leaders, and they operate under certain promises, under the pressure of certain promises. Yeah.
Okay,
All right.
Thank you.
Call to action. Call to action. Please introduce yourselves to each other. Please introduce yourselves to me. Learn as much as you can, and thank you again for coming.
Thank you.